Throughout this time of Lent, the 40 days up until Easter, we have been emphasizing spiritual disciplines that we do, things we do in order to give our love and our devotion to God. And so we talked about so many varieties of them that have been taught to us from the ancient fathers and mothers of the church: meditation and prayer, solitude and silence, fasting, justice, ethics, charity. Lots of different things we've talked about, and there's so many more that we can do in order to show Christ that we're serious, that we're giving our heart to Christ, that we're following Him every step of the way. And now, in this Holy Week, we turn to something infinitely more important, and what our Lutheran theology reminds us is the main thing. Not what we do for Christ or what we do for God, but what God in Christ has done and does do and will always do for us. What God does for us is exemplified in today, Palm Sunday, in Maundy Thursday, in Good Friday, and in Easter Sunday. And I invite and I encourage you this week to think not what you do for Christ, but what Christ does for you. What Christ did years ago, what Christ does still today, out of love for you. That's the main thing. Not our faithfulness to God, but God's faithfulness to us. Today we're looking at when Jesus walked into the holy city of Jerusalem, going up, literally up a hill to the temple, in order to go to the sacred feast, this Passover. And going up there, we see that what He gave us and gives us always is courage. When we read this text, we are shocked at the amount of courage it could take to go into the city knowing that that's where His beloved people would arrest Him, try Him, and kill Him. If you look at the gospel, right before this happens, He's hanging out with His closest friends. We talked before about how He brought Lazarus back from the grave. Remember we talked about Mary and Martha, the sisters to Lazarus? All three of them, those three siblings, very, very good friends to Jesus. So much so that Jesus wept when He heard that Lazarus had died. And Martha was really upset. Lord, where were you? You should have been here. Her seeming anger at the fact that He wasn't there because He could have saved Lazarus immediately from going through the death process. Where were you? Mary, weeping at the death of her brother, also saying, where were you, Lord? Why were you not here? From this grieving situation, now we see, right before Palm Sunday, right before He entered into the holy city of Jerusalem, we see Jesus hanging out at their house, having a meal. It says that Lazarus is reclining at the table, because tables were on the ground. So he's reclining. No longer dead, Lazarus, but he's eating. He's enjoying breaking bread with his friend Jesus and his sisters, Mary and Martha. We see Martha no longer angry, no longer resentful that Jesus wasn't there, but instead walking around giving them food, serving, as Martha was known to do, at this table. And we see Mary no longer weeping, but putting nard, which was an expensive perfume, upon the feet of Jesus in blessing, and wiping it with her own hair. What a beautiful picture this paints of a wonderful family situation, and Jesus is included and invited and enveloped into this meal where they're breaking bread and where they're washing feet. He's given these gifts by His family. Immediately after that, He then enters the city of Jerusalem, of course, knowing what's going to be happening there, because we see that He already told His disciples that He would soon die. He already knew what was happening. So look what He could have done. He could have stayed with Lazarus with Mary, with Martha. He could have stayed. Where any of us would have stayed, probably, unless we had superhuman strength, unless we had incredible faith. He could have stayed with the people that loved him. He could have stayed reclining at a table with Lazarus. He could have stayed being served by Martha, loved by Mary, there in a home with respect, with food, with comfort, with love, with safety. And yet he didn't. He chose to go to Jerusalem. He also could have destroyed the Romans with a lightning bolt. I mean, he's God. And he didn't. Even more, he could have stayed safe in the first place as God, up there in the clouds, never having been born that first Christmas in Bethlehem, never having entered the human race, which is a walk not only of celebration and food and friends, but is a walk of suffering. And he chose to enter humanity as one of us. Why? Because you can't get close to people from the clouds. And he's there in the human race, walking alongside us, breaking bread, washing feet, hanging out, because you are worth it. Not just the people from thousands of years ago there in Israel, but you. You are worth it. Even that. That's the kind of love God has for you. If you were the only one he did this for, he could have done it. He would have done it, for sure. You're his creation, and you are worth it. So he chose, with incredible courage, to enter into Jerusalem knowing what that meant. He wasn't just God, he was also fully human. And his fully human self doubtless felt fear that day. Doubtless. We know those prayers he prayed shortly after. Take this cup from me, Father. Take it, please. He was human like the rest of us, or it wouldn't have been a sacrifice. If he could have just waltzed in there without human feeling, it wouldn't have taken courage. But as a full human being, as he's also fully God, he chose and he had courage to go into the city that day. He chose to face the fear in order to get to the other side. The other side will come, it would come, but he had to go through the valley of the shadow of death, not circumvent death. That day, when the people were there shouting Hosanna and waving their palm branches, it wasn't just a procession. It was also a protest, because they very much knew who was in charge of things around here, and that was the Roman Empire. And the Romans did not care about you, me, anybody. The Romans were all about power. They were empire, as many empires are, leading from the top down, not the bottom up, like the power that Jesus had, not as a servant king, but as a boot on the neck of the people. And they were also going in to Jerusalem that same day. There were two groups processing into the holy city. Those who followed Jesus and those who were the Roman Empire. And so it wasn't just that people were waving their palms and shouting Hosanna, like saying the word yay, we like you, Jesus. It also has the subtext of do something around here, please. We need your help. Save us. Because remember, the people thought that the Messiah would be like King David. They thought that he, Jesus, like David, would save the day. David politically unified Israel. David solved people's problems and situations. David was the one who was continually fighting the proverbial Goliath. So come on, Jesus, here's your moment. You're coming into Jerusalem. Here with the powers that be, save us. And they would be shocked and devastated to see what was just ahead for them. In these two groups, Jesus knew what was ahead. Jesus knew that what was ahead was not riding in like the Romans on chariots and horses and with swords and with empire. That was not his path. He was the one coming in there to die, to lay down his life, to be the Prince of Peace, to be the God of nonviolence, even though he was the one who created it all and hung the stars and gave them all life and breath. He was going to lay down his life in order to conquer death, in order to be the victim that would finally become the victor of sin and death on behalf of the people and on behalf of you and me. So now let us open our hearts as we hear this gospel story that is just as powerful today as it was then. As we hear the gospel story, let us open our hearts with awe, with wonder, as if we're hearing it for the first time. And let us see the courage that it took for him to do this for us. The Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Glory to you, O Lord. One of the 12, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I betray him to you?" They paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, he began to look for an opportunity to betray him. On the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Where do you want us to make the preparations for you to eat the Passover?" He said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says my time is near. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.'" So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover meal. When it was evening, he took his place with the 12 disciples, and while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." And they became greatly distressed, and began to say to him one after the other, "Surely not I, Lord." He answered, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him. But woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that one not to have been born." Judas, who betrayed him, said, "Surely not I, Rabbi." He replied, "You have said so." While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to the disciples, and said, "Take, eat. This is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will never again drink of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." When they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them, "You will all fall away because of me this night, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go ahead of you to Galilee." Peter said to him, "Even if all fall away because of you, I will never fall away." Jesus said to him, "Truly I tell you, this very night, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, "Even though I must die with you, I will not deny you." And so said all the disciples.
Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took with him Peter and 2 sons of Zebedee, and began to be grieved and agitated. And then he said to them, "My soul is deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me." And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not what I want, but what you want." Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, and said to Peter, "So you could not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again he went away for the second time and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." Again he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words. Then came in to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Now the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. Look, my betrayer is at hand." While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him a large crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him." At once he came up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you are here to do." Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. Suddenly one of those with Jesus put his hand on a sword, drew it, and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will die by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled, which said it must happen in this way?" At that hour Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a rebel? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. But all this has taken place so that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled.
Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and elders had gathered. But Peter was following him at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest. And going inside, he sat with the guards in order to see how this would end. Now, the chief priests and the whole council were looking for false testimony against Jesus, so that they might put him to death. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last, 2 came forward and said, "This fellow said, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days.'" The high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But Jesus was silent. Then the high priest said to him, "I put you under oath before the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "You have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He has blasphemed. Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard now his blasphemy. What do you think?" They answered, "He deserves death." Then they spat in his face and struck him, and some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Messiah. Who is it that struck you?" Now, Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A female servant came to him and said, "You also were with Jesus the Galilean." But he denied it before all of them, saying, "I do not know what you are talking about." When he went out to the porch, another female servant saw him, and she said to the bystanders, "This man was with Jesus the Nazarene." Again, he he denied it with an oath. I do not know the man. After a little while, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, certainly you are also one of them, for your accent betrays you. Then he began to curse, and he swore an oath. I do not know the man. At that moment, the cock crowed. Then Peter remembered what Jesus had said. Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly.
When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people conferred together against Jesus in order to bring about his death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate, the governor. When Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he repented and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. He said, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. But they said, what is that to us? See to it yourself. Throwing down the pieces of silver in the temple, he departed, and he went and hanged himself. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, it is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since they are blood money. After conferring together, they used them to buy the potter's field as a place to bury foreigners. For this reason, that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of the one on whom a price had been set, on whom some of the people of Israel had set a price. And they gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord commanded me. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus said, you say so. But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, do you not hear how many accusations they make against you? But he gave him no answer, not even a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now, at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, whom do you want me to release for you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Messiah? For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, have nothing to do with that innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him. Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas, to have Jesus killed. The governor again said to them, which of the two do you want me to release for you? And they said, Barabbas. Pilate said to them, and what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah? All of them said, let him be crucified. And he asked, why? What evil has he done? But they shouted all the more, let him be crucified.
So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves. Then the people as a whole answered, his blood be on us and on our children. So he released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand and knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. After mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they came upon a man from Cyrene named Simon. They compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink, mixed with gall. But when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Then they sat down there and kept watch over him. Over his head, they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he wants to. For he said, 'I am God's son.'" The rebels who were crucified with them also taunted him in the same way.
From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani?" That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "This man is calling for Elijah." At once, one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink. But the others said, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him." Then Jesus cried out with a loud voice and breathed his last. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in 2 from top to bottom. The earth shook, and the rocks were split. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. After his resurrection, they came out of the tombs and entered the holy city and appeared to many. Now, when the centurion and those with him who were keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what took place, they were terrified and said, "Truly, this man was God's son." Many women were also there, looking on from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him. Among them were Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who also was himself a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. So Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn into the rock. He then rolled a great stone to the door of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember what the impostor said while he was still alive. After 3 days I will rise again. Therefore, command the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise, his disciples may go and steal him away and tell the people he has been raised from the dead. And the last deception would be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can." So they went with the guard and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone. We sit in silence.